All right, Shalom. Start first by giving all praises and glories unto Yahweh, by Hashem Yahushua, by Hashem Awakakwadash. Double honor to the elder apostles at Great Millstone who proved well. And greetings, salutations, and blessings unto the hopeful elect. Shalom. All right, so I have an article here, and this is, man, the audacity of the harlot, the whore, Babylon the Great, the virgin daughter of Babylon, aka Egypt, aka Nineveh, United States of America. Man, how dare you? How dare the Western world push out this sentiment to the whole world? When you're the newcomer to the earth, you're the one of the youngest countries, superpowers in the earth. Okay, it says this is from RT.com. It says, don't mention Western aggression. The economists blame polygamy for wars, not Western aggression, right? And I'm pretty much just go through this whole article. I'm just pretty much read it. Here we go. It says, according to the economists, polygamy is a key factor in civil wars and conflict. How convenient to blame it all on the natives and their backward customs. It's funny because the whole world, the old known world, polygamy was a known and accepted custom, practiced throughout the world, the Eastern, the old world. Okay, it's not until the so-called white man came into power and wanted to keep down the other nations' population that they began, and they was ruling where they can change the laws, where they able to make it about monogamy. Okay, it says obscuring the role of the U.S. and its allies in destabilizing regions. Unbelievable. It says in the 1930s, Marx Brothers comedy Animal Crackers, Groucho Marx proposes to two women at the same time. He protests, but that's bigamy. Groucho replies, yes, and that's big of me too. It's big of all of us. Let's be big for a change. I'm sick of these conventional marriages. And I'm not going to get into yes or no, because it's not necessarily expedient at this time to have multiple wives, but at the same time, it is a custom of the Hebrew Israelites. It's a custom of most of the Western world. But it's not expedient. All things are lawful, but not expedient, okay? It says, we know the economist isn't a great fan of Karl Marx, and it's doubtful it would approve of Groucho much either, or at least the idea of him taking two wives. You'll see it will probably lead to armed conflict. They're setting it up, right? It says, forget the illegal invasion of Iraq, which led to 1 million deaths and turned the Middle East into a cauldron. Forget, too, the mass casualties of two world wars. It's polygamy that we could be focusing on to explain violence in the world. Run for your wives, more like run for your lives. It's fair to say that the Economist, the weekly Bible of Western neoliberal capitalism, is very keen that we get the polygamy equals war thesis. This is something that the Western world wants to push. The polygamy equals war thesis. And there's a very hypocritical underlying thing here. Okay, I'll tap into it in a minute, but it says polygamy is still common in Africa, in Islam, the Islamic world, and parts of Asia. It makes civil war more likely, we were told on Twitter. Unbelievable. This one won't play, but I'll see. This is what. Let me see if that'll play. Got to play. Destabilize society. Okay, how does polygamy destabilize society? If the richest and the most powerful 10% of men have 4 wives each, the bottom 30 of men cannot marry. Young men will take desperate measures to avoid this fate. Polygamy is banned in all Western countries. We make it right. But it's common in the Islamic world parts of Africa. Damn marriages are polygamous. Shortage of brides, okay? It costs 100 cows to get married. Poor young men cannot afford this. So some of them are tempted to pick up guns. Hold on. Because when you remember, Benjamin, I believe it was, went and took the daughters of doing when they were out there dancing. I believe that was in the book of Numbers. They went and just took them wives, man, by force, so that their numbers wouldn't dwindle down too low, so that their people wouldn't, their tribe wouldn't diminish completely. Okay, so that's not out the realm of it, but they're painting a picture here of trying to emotionally tie you people into this whole thing. Okay, you don't believe that it's just morally wrong anymore, so now you got to believe. Now you've got to believe the fact of it being gonna lead to war. All right. Steal cows, thousands of people killed in cattle paid every year. Blighted by war. Young men, the alternative to war is celibacy. Polygamous societies are bloodier, wow, and more prone to collapse. These are practiced in more than 20 unstable countries in the world. Unstable, of course. Is in retreat. It is support. And this goes with some of the studies that they've done. The so-called white man Esau, according to the Bible, that he's having trouble reproducing numbers, building his family structure. You know, he's not getting his woman pregnant. He's not the life span and expectancy level is at his all-time low. You know, this man's dying off quickly. Okay, so this is to combat that, because he don't want these other nations rising up in number and taking him down. Something he's always considered. Okay, that's where this whole monogamy thing comes from. 2/5 of Kazakhstan wants to realize, but they thwarted with the female MP. Allow women to take multiple husbands. The bill was dropped. Yeah, because it's wrong. Don't make no sense. You know? Anyway, it says, this follows an article entitled "Why Polygamy Breeds Civil War," published on March 19, 2018. It says, a piece by the Economist foreign editor Robert Guest, entitled "Big Love and Big War." It says on January 12, 2018, which cited a 2009 study by Satoshi Kanazawa of the LSE, and another piece entitled "The Link Between Polygamy and War," published in the 2017 Christmas edition. It says, whenever it is widely practiced, polygamy, especially polygyny, the taking of multiple wives, destabilizes society, largely because it is a form of inequality. Inequality is a Western principle. Okay? It is the so-called white man being on top. Is that inequality? Yes, it's inequality. It's funny how only a problem for inequality when the Negro, Latinos, and Native Americans are the bottom percentage and in poverty. Okay, they're the most impoverished people on the planet. Okay, it says which creates an urgent distress in the hearts and loins of young men. The last piece states, wow, unbelievable. It said the neoliberal economist, which has championed all the Thatcherite reforms, Margaret Thatcher, Thatcherite reforms of the past 40 years concerned with inequality. Why you could have knocked me down with the feather. Yeah, it was easy. And it says, the article also says polygamy is one of the reasons why the Arab Spring erupted, why the jihadists of Boko Haram and Islamic State were able to conquer swaths of Nigeria, Iraq, and Syria, and why the polygamous parts of Indonesia and Haiti are so turbulent. Now, where are these facts coming from? There may be a correlation between the two, but that doesn't mean that that's the reason for it. It adds, polygamous societies are bloodier, more likely to invade their neighbors, and more prone to collapse than others, which we just watched a video talking about it. The Economist doesn't blame polygamy for the recent heat wave that's probably coming up in next week's edition. By way of evidence, the magazine states the taking of multiple wives is a feature of life in all the 20 most unstable countries on the Fragile States Index compiled by the Fund for Peace and NGO. Okay. It says, but if we look at said index, we see that a large number of the top 20 have been affected directly or indirectly by Western destabilization campaigns, or even in case of Yemen 4, Iraq 10, Syria 6, Afghanistan 9, by Western allegiance invasion bombing. Okay? It's polygyny that's doing it, not the Western destabilization of those areas, going in there and trying to bring in democracy and trying to bring in the Western world and just destabilize their countries. Okay? It says, this is the link. The thing about this is we're not ignorant to Satan's devices, okay? We see what he's trying to do. We know what the agenda of him is to do. Destabilize the area, control the oil and all of the power over there so they can control the world completely, put everybody under this microchip, and he can rule the world forever, thus getting his birthright back. But he doesn't know that the Most High God, Yahweh, has other plans, okay? He's going to send his son, Yahweh Shai, back, and he's going to raise up the elect of the nation of Israel, the so-called Negro, Latinos, and Native Americans, and put us back into power as he takes this man down. America will be destroyed, the Western world and their regime will be destroyed, okay? And here comes in the power of the Israelites. And it's going to be bloody, it's going to be serious, okay? This is the link that the economists won't mention because it has largely been in favor of these interventions. Who can ever forget the way that the magazine whitewashed the Iraq invasion with insincere deceivers cover featuring the warmongers Bush and Blair? Now, I want to also say this, talking about how they don't mention this. How come you're not bringing up the fact that Mormons are polygamous? It's so quick to talk about the Islamics, which we're not Muslims or anything like that, the Islamic State, but we're not none of that. But you don't bring up Mormonism. Mormonism is actually going on inside the Western world, particularly in the United States. Okay? The mountainous areas of the West. Okay? No one's bringing that up, though. They still practice that in Utah and certain surrounding states in that area. Okay? No one's talking about that, how they have all their families are 20 children deep. When I went to a school with a Mormon family, there were 20 of them. 2 of them, there were some that were in the same grade, and there were a bunch of them, they were just 1 year apart. Like maybe 7 in a row, one year apart, and then there was a couple twins or same age that came in in the same grade. Like maybe 2 sets or 3 sets of 2. They had like 20 children. Okay? It says South Sudan and Sudan feature heavily in the economics arguments, but again, the U.S. role in sponsoring oil rich South Sudan's secession and creating instability in the region is not mentioned. If you're going to pick out points, you got to pick them all out, but that's what this accuser does, okay? This deceiver, this devil does. He points to you and only shows you what he wants you to see, and then you begin to form an opinion that's biasly based. Okay. As for the conquering of Boko Haram and Islamic State, IS, formerly ISIS, of vast swaths of Nigeria, Iraq, and Syria, who do we blame for that? Here, my fellow op-ed contributor Dan Glazebrook, writing about global famines. The situation in Nigeria is also a result of war. In this case, the Boko Haram insurgency, an insurgency which owes its massive spread in recent years directly to NATO destruction of Libya, which opened up the country's weapons dump to Boko Haram and its partners. Unbelievable. They don't bring that up though. It says a destruction of Libya, which the economics describes as a modest win for liberal internationalism. The Iraq War, also backed by the economics, led directly to the rise of IS. Talking about ISIS. They broke down to IS, ISIL, all of those. With Syria, whose polygamy rate, or NA, in the index, became a fragile state only because of the regime change operations of the West and its regional allies. It says the more we analyze the global situation, a very clear pattern emerges. The U.S. and its allies have targeted a succession of independently minded, resource-rich countries strategically important in strategically important parts of the world, and where they haven't been able to directly invade, they have fomented civil wars to further their own economic and geopolitical interests. Because they want the region, they want to control the whole world. They want their birthright, okay? They want to completely control the whole world and then take it over with the New World Order and the Mark of the Beast as their system of control. All right? And also, let's not forget the Georgia Guidestones by killing off 6.5 billion of the people in the world, okay? It says, a classic example of the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 90s, unilateral secessions were encouraged from the Republic. Why do you think Russia brought back Crimea? Because that was a lot of their area was broken up and destabilized their region. Well, when they bring it back, now they are all under one control. When you watch the movie Hero with Jet Li, what do you see in that movie? You see how the king is actually a hero, because as all the samurai, whoever, were fighting against the king to not to take control of their country, he controlled all the countries of China and then built the wall to protect all the provinces of China. Okay? So he could unite the Chinese people. Well, that's what America is doing the opposite of. They're destabilizing, breaking up these larger countries into smaller provinces and smaller countries to destabilize the region. But for them to break off, they have to break from the original, from the main head of that country. It says unilateral secessions were encouraged from the Republic in contravention of Article 5 of the Yugoslav Constitution. Another article there. It says separatist politicians and armed militias were backed, even if they were once classified as terrorist groups, like the Kosovo Liberation Army attempts by local actors to sort things out peacefully were sabotaged. The example when U.S. Ambassador Warren Zimmerman persuaded Bosnian separatist Elijah Bekovic to renege on his signing of the EU-sponsored 92 Lisbon Accord. Then, when things got out of hand, NATO powers could use the violence on their ground as an excuse for intervention. This sounds like what America does. When you go into the movies, the Bourne Identity and those type of movies, that's what Jason Bourne was about. He could become any citizen of any hostile nation and then create killing certain people and then create tension in those areas, okay? destabilize those areas from the inside. Though he would blend in as one of the citizens of those countries or areas, he was really working for the regime of the West. Okay, movies like that have Esau telling all on himself. It wasn't just Matt Damon in his action film. It was talking about what the so-called white man does in his espionage and his spy stuff, spy movie stuff, his spy operations. Okay, it says when the things got out of hand, NATO powers could use the violence on the ground with an excuse for intervention, with the aim of bringing the Balkans under full economic and military control. In November 2012, the New York Times ran an article on how the Americans who helped free Kosovo were returning there as entrepreneurs to bid for privatized assets. You see how they destabilized it, then they were able to come back and benefit off of that area, as entrepreneurs. Crazy. And I know the Bushes and what was his, Cheney's and Halliburton and all of those have been repeating that process and getting rich on destabilized nations. When you watch the movie Lord of War with Nicolas Cage, it shows you the same thing, how we're funding both sides of the war. Okay? To keep it destabilized, they kept wanting to buy guns, but then they didn't show the bigger picture of a destabilized nation now, that they could bring in the American or the Western armies to take over that, to have a reason to intervene. It says, so many former American officials have returned to Kosovo for business in coal and telecommunications or for lobbying and other lucrative government contracts, that it is hard to keep them from colliding, the paper reported. The pattern has been repeated across the world. In 2006, a cable from U.S. Ambassador to Syria, William Roebuck, discussed potential vulnerabilities of the Bashar Assad government and the possible means to exploit them. Okay, it says one of the possible means, as I noted here, was to seek and divide the Shiite and the Sunni communities in Syria. The U.S. and its regional allies have flooded Syria with weapons and foreign jihadists in pursuance of their objectives. But hey, let's blame NA polygamy figures for Syria's current fragile state, shall we? Okay? But polygyny is the thing. So it's actually a war on two different things. Okay? War on those countries that have it, and war on being fruitful and multiply as the Most High God that commanded the people of the earth. Okay? Once he told Noah and his three sons to repopulate the earth, he said, be fruitful and multiply. When you go into Genesis, the 6th chapter, and I believe the 7th chapter after that, okay? Talking about the whole flood story, okay? It says, and particularly, they said Ishmael would be, Abraham would be the father of many nations, which Ishmael came out of Abraham, okay? But the blessing went to Isaac. Anyway, it said it is a very similar story in Afghanistan. The late U.S. diplomat and former national security advisor, Zig Binwi, I don't know, that's a crazy name. Brzezinski was the architect of the U.S. policy of backing Islamist fighters to try to bleed the Soviet Union, which supported the secular left-wing government in Kabul. It says, as I commented in a previous op-ed, Zig's policy had far-reached global consequences. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda grew out of the Mujahideen, and then many years later, the U.S. led an invasion of Afghanistan to try to get rid of the Taliban. He said in 1998, Brzezinski was asked, do you regret having supported Islamic fundamentalists which have given arms and advice to future terrorists? He replied, what was more important to the history of the world, the Taliban or the collapse of the Soviet Empire? that agenda gets fulfilled. It says, the Taliban or the collapse of the Islamic Empire, some agitated Muslims or the liberation of Central Europe, and the end of the Cold War. It says, today we're expected to put full blame on those agitated Muslims and forget who got them so worked up and so well armed. We're meant to see the conflicts and civil wars in close up and not in long shot. Where Boko Haram and IS get their weaponry and funding is not a question we're supposed to ask. Instead, let's focus on cultural factors, okay? Let's talk about marriage customs and not the numbers of the side of spent missile cases. And not the actual things that would destabilize the area and cause war, like killing. Let's do polygyny. Let's do being fruitful and multiplying. But we know that this is all to demonize certain practices in the world in certain countries, in certain regions of the world, okay? That the West wants to control over, to get the backing of the Western minds of the people, so they don't feel bad about them going in and taking over those regions and bombing certain regions. It says, but in its intellectual cop-out to write, it's an intellectual cop-out to write about the world's conflict zones and not mention the role of the West, that the West has played in fueling the fires and the commercial interests that lie behind the wars, okay, and which profit greatly from them. Wars, conflicts, and all business. Sighs the anti-hero Monsieur Verdot at the end of Chaplin's classic 1947 film. It is no great surprise that the organ espousing the ideologies of elite Western business interests prefers to blame something else and not themselves. He hold himself not blameless. Okay? That's how the so-called white man, the goddamn devil of the Bible, would operate. That's what he would do. He would accuse the Israelites of breaking the law, but not show that he was the one setting it up that they were breaking the laws. They would pray to their Heavenly Father saying, look what he's doing. Look, they're breaking the law. Like the Heavenly Father don't see that he set it up for them to break the law. Okay? Talking about the law of the Bible, the laws of the Most High God, Yahweh. Okay? But the Most High sees all right? So with that, I just kind of want to read over that. I thought it was a very interesting article. Did a little bit of narration, showed a little video or whatever. Gave a couple comments off the top, quoted a couple scriptures and whatever. So Lord willing, you were edified by this, giving all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Hashai, Ba'ashim, Hakakodas, that belongs to the elder apostles of great millstone, who rule well, and greetings, salutations, and blessings unto the hopeful elect. Shalom.